Everybody. So, I'm going to be doing a series of instructional videos that will show how I make my Octo4aPreemie for the hospitals that I service. And I thought this would be good to do a whole series of video that will take you from the very beginning of the process to the very end. So this is the first one. This is going to be a materials video. It's going to go over all the materials that I use and some of the tools that I use and some of the things that help me. First things first is obviously the yarn. The yarn is very important. It has to be 100% cotton. Personally, I love this cotton from Hobby Lobby. It's pretty much all that I use. So when I get a skein in, before I work with it, I will roll it up into a ball or balls, depending on, how many knots there are inside the skein. Reason being is that if there is a knot in the skein, we cannot trust the knot to hold. We have to make our own knots. So we need to cut the knot out and then reattach, and I'll go over that process at some point. On another video, but we'll need to then reattach the loose end and make a new knot. We cannot trust factory knots, so I roll my skeins up into balls, and just roll it and roll it. And so if there's a knot that shows up, then I'll cut it, and then I will make a new ball. And I know that every single one of my balls has no knots. All right. So, and generally speaking, I'll end up sometimes with two balls. Usually it's two balls, especially on the variegated colors. And I do tend to find there's at least one knot in the variegated. In the solid, usually not very many knots that I've discovered, but variegated do. And sometimes I'll just stick them in bags just to keep them all straight, because I have all sorts of different colors. And so then I know that this ball and this ball and this ball, there's no knots in there. So I can, start a tentacle, and I can finish the tentacle without having to worry about having to frog it or rip it back apart. Because if there is a knot that shows up, or if you run out of yarn halfway through your tentacle, you have to undo your tentacle all the way to the base of the head and tie up here. We cannot have any knots tied in the middle of a tentacle. So that's a very important rule to follow. And this is some method that I use to try to alleviate or eliminate the problem of having having to do a tentacle and then having to start all over. So we don't want to have to do that. And a process that many call yarn chicken. Do I have enough yarn? Well, that's a good question. So I have this gizmo, and I've had it for many years, but it works. And I know how much yarn I need for just the head. I know how much yarn I need for just the tentacles. So I will go and measure a ball and to determine whether I have enough. That one probably, it's not enough, but so I know I can use that one up to a certain point. And then I'm probably going to have to get another one. And so, but I do know that I have at least, between these two, I have enough based on what I need to make all the tentacles. So, that's just planning ahead. So anyway, so that's another tool that I use, is this scale. And then, we'll just set that aside for now. So that's pretty much it about the yarn. What about the stuffing? What do we use for the stuffing? For the stuffing, we use, let's see if I can get it in this picture. Polyfill. You can get this at Walmart, at Hobby Lobby, at Michael's. They pretty much sell it anywhere. That's what I use. Some other people use other things. What I use and I usually will put it into a Ziploc bag and just keep it in a Ziploc bag. I use a screwdriver. I use a screwdriver to stuff the stuffing in the head. In another video, I'll go over that, and you can see that. Hooks. What do I use for my hooks? Well, I have 3 that I use. My go-to hook has been and always will be the Clover Moore 2.75, but use whatever hook that you need to achieve and master the pattern the way it's supposed to. But I use this one. This is my favorite. More recently, I've started to use the Tulip 2.75. This one I find for some reason it gets me a little bit tighter sketch. I think the head is a little bit smaller. I don't know if you can see that, just a tiny fraction. But that tiny fraction is really all that I needed to really tighten up the first 6 rows a little bit more. And so I used this one for the first 6 rows, and I'll go over that on the video that shows how I start my head. But I use this one for the first 6 rows, and then I switched to this one for the rest of the octopus. Every once in a while, when I'm attaching the plug is this part down here, this part. When I'm attaching the plug to the head, I'll find that it's really tight. And if it's super duper tight and I'm really struggling with my regular hook, I'll go down a size. And that's this one. This is the Clover Amour 2.25 millimeter hook. And this is smaller than either of these two guys. And this one I might use from time to time to attach the plug to the head, which I would show in a different video. Next thing is a marker. My marker is a safety pin, but obviously you can use whatever marker works best for you. Next thing is a needle. I use the needle because, and it's a small needle because these stitches are super duper duper tight. I mean, this thing is very, and I struggle pushing this through, but this is what I'll use to fish the head, the tail at the very end after I'm done with the last tentacle. This is what I use to weave it through. This is also what I use to do my eyes. So we'll go over that when we do that part of the octopus. I have a pair of little pliers. I use these to pull, believe it or not, to pull the needle out after it's being fished through the head. It's so tight. This is hard. I don't know if you can hear that, but this is as hard as a rock. So, and it needs to be. And so it's sometimes really difficult because that little needle will slip. So I use these to pull that out. Very handy to have. Of course, you want your pair of scissors. And then you also want to have some type of measuring device to measure your tentacles. Make sure that they're the right length, to measure your head, to make sure it's the right length. Width on the head doesn't matter. You know, it can be a fat head, it can be a skinny head, just as long as the height is correct. You know, you're good to go. Okay, so then the next thing we have, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of sitting wrong here, but this fits within the parameters that are required. And so then the next thing here is this little gadget, and this little gadget has saved my finger from having a big divot in it. And it also, oops, I used it the wrong way. I use it this way with the opening away. And I'll show you how I feed the yarn through this gizmo, and that helps increase tension, kind of like it does with the sewing machine. So I just feed it right through, and it's very helpful. By the way, this is a size 18 needle I got this in at Hobby Lobby, and I get a pack, because multiple packs sometimes at a time, because I lose them. The other thing I use from time to time, if I'm crocheting a lot, I use this compression glove. I actually won this compression glove from the national group, and I still use it from time to time. I keep it in my bag, and so this really helps keep my working hand, this hand, the holding hand, nice, and it just provides a little bit of comfort sometimes when I'm doing a lot of octos at a time. So that pretty much covers all of the materials that I use. On the next video, we'll go ahead and start with the beginning of the head, and we'll talk about the pattern a little bit.